Hi everybody. So today we're going to be learning about a way to take our comprehension or our thinking about the books just a little bit further. We're going to try to organize our thoughts, okay? And we're going to do that by thinking of the beginning, the middle, and the end of a book. The fancy word for that is sequencing. So we're going to be talking about sequencing and making order out of our thoughts. So we're going to be thinking about the order in which things come, and that's going to help us think more about this book. So the book is my sister's absolute favorite book, and one we used to read a lot as kids. Caps for Sale. We actually read this at one of the first literacy nights at Monroe because it's such a hit for me. I love this book. My daughter kind of likes this book, and she might join in on this video too. So, as we're reading, we're going to think about what happened at the beginning of this book, the middle of this book, and the end of this book. We're also going to be thinking about the order in which things happen. And this is my daughter. This is Leona.
Hi.
Okay. The first thing she did was came on camera. The second thing she did was smiled. And the third thing she did at the end was said goodbye. That's the sequence of what happened. All right. Once there was a peddler who sold caps, but he was not like an ordinary peddler carrying his wares on his back. He carried them on top of his head. First, he had on his own checked cap, then a bunch of gray caps, then a bunch of brown caps, then a bunch of blue caps, then on the very top, a bunch of red caps. I notice a little mini sequence happening right here, the order in which things happened. He puts his hats on in a very certain way, and there was a word that tipped me off a lot. Here, if you hear a word that gets repeated that tips you off, there's an order of things. First, he had on his own checked cap, then a bunch of gray caps, then a bunch of brown caps, then a bunch of blue caps, and at the very top, a bunch of red caps. Then, that word was repeated a lot, and he had a very specific order for the way he put on his hats. We're still at the beginning of the book, so let's keep listening for the order of the ways things happen in this book. We know the order of the hats, but let's listen to the order of the events or the way things unfold in this story. So far, we have the beginning. He walked up and down the streets, holding himself very straight as to not upset his caps. As he went along, he called, "Caps! Caps for sale! 50 cents a cap!" One morning, he couldn't sell any caps. He walked down the street, yelling, "Caps! Caps for sale! 50 cents a cap!" But nobody wanted any caps that morning. Nobody even wanted a red cap. He began to feel very hungry, but he had no money for lunch. "I think I'll go for a walk in the country," said he, and he walked out of town, slowly, slowly, so as to not upset any of his caps. He had all those caps balancing on his head. He had to make sure they're staying up there right. He walked for a long time. I noticed that they're really driving home this idea of walking, because this is the third sentence about walking. He walked for a long time until he came to a great big tree. "That's a nice place for a rest," thought he. And he sat down very slowly under the tree and leaned back little by little against the tree trunk so as to not disturb the caps on his head. Then he put up his hand to feel if they were straight. First, his checked cap, then his gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, then the red caps on the very top. They were all there. So he went to sleep. He slept for a long time. I think something's going to happen here.
Me too.
This is pretty dramatic page. Not too many words, big picture, not too much happening here, but a lot of emphasis on it. What's going to happen? When he woke up, he was refreshed and rested. But before standing up, he felt with his hand to make sure his caps were in the right place. All he felt was his own checked cap. He looked to the right of him, no caps. He looked to the left of him, no caps. He looked to the back of him, no caps. He looked behind the tree, no caps. Then he looked up into the tree, and what do you think he saw? On every branch sat a monkey, and on every monkey was a gray, a brown, a blue, or a red cap. The peddler looked at the monkeys. The monkeys looked at the peddler. He didn't know what to do. Finally, he spoke to them. "You monkeys, you!" he said, shaking a finger at them. "You give me back my caps!" But the monkeys only shook their fingers back at him and said, "Tss, tss, 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 tss." This made the peddler angry, so he shook both hands at them and said, "You monkeys, you! You give me back my caps!" But the monkeys only shook both their hands back at him and said, "Tss, tss, 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 tss." Now he felt quite angry. He stomped his foot and he said, "You monkeys, you! You better give me back my caps!" But the monkeys only stomped their feet and said, "Tss, tss, 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 tss." By this time, the peddler was really very, very angry. He stomped both his feet and shouted, "You monkeys, you! You must give me back my caps!" But the monkeys only stomped both their feet at him and said, "Tss, tss, 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 tss." At last he became so angry that he pulled off his own cap and threw it on the ground and began to walk away. Sometimes that's a good way to handle a problem, is just walk away. If two people are going to get into it, give them a breather. But then each monkey pulled off his cap. All the gray caps, all the brown caps. Which one comes next? Do you remember? All the blue caps, all the red caps, all came flying down out of the tree. So the peddler picked up his caps, put them back on his head. First his own checked cap, then the gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, then the red caps, and on the very top, slowly, he walked back to town calling, "Caps, caps for sale, 50 cents a cap." So, what were some of the first things that happened in this book? Yeah, we learned it was a peddler. Let's see about one thing that really summarized the beginning. What was really the beginning of this story, the beginning of this journey? Probably when he walked out of town, right? So here's walking into town. But when this story really kicked off, the real beginning of this story was when he walked out of town, okay, and went out to the country. A lot of things happen in the beginning. This is probably the most important thing, but a lot of things happen in the beginning, and I heard you say some of those. Now let's think about the middle part of the story. What were some of the things that happened in the middle of the story? Yeah? There was something that was kind of like the turning point, that really dramatic space. What happened then? That was when he went to sleep and all the monkeys took his hats. Now, at the end of the story, there was other things that happened in the beginning, in the middle of the story too, right? Like they tisked at him and they yelled at him, and then he threw the hats down, and they threw the hats down. But at the very end of the story, what kind of was the ending part? Yeah, probably when he went back to town, because he already had resolved that conflict, which was the monkeys gave him back his hat because he threw him on the ground and they threw him on the ground. Okay, so that was the end of it. This is the very end of the story. Look, it even says the end. So now that's a sequence: the beginning, the middle, and the end. And once we get those down, we're going to be able to think about like cause and effect. Like for instance, what caused the monkeys to throw the hats down? Well, first he threw his down, then they threw his down. And another thing we can do after sequencing is we can think about things like patterns. So like there was patterns of hats, right? The first hat. What was the first color hat he always used to put on top of his head? Yeah, he always used to put, wait, I think I heard it. Say it again. It's really hard to hear you sometimes on this thing. Gray caps, then brown caps, then blue caps, then at the very top, his red cap. So that's the pattern or the order of which he put them. So we know gray, brown, blue, red. So when we start all over, we'd start with gray. That's sequencing, and those are some ways to take it further. And hope you guys like this story. I know my sister, if she watches YouTube, she would have loved it. because even though she's like super old now, she's like over 40, she loves that story. So see you guys.